Topic 2. This topic comes from our friend Will Powers over at Deep Silver.
Yeah.
He says, or he tweeted something that I thought
You're
was
just
really,
stealing his tweet.
I'm stealing his tweet,
Gotcha.
which I told him I was gonna.
Yeah.
I thought it was a very interesting question. He says, what makes a game worth $60 to you? Replayability, fun factor, hours of gameplay, multiplayer, graphics? Each one of those has a question mark. I thought it was a good discussion because looking through those things, I think all of those can justify the $60, except for the graphics. Graphics is the one that I was like,
So the
I don't
order.
know if that makes it.
The order wasn't justified being a $60 game to you.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
But then I thought about it a bit more, and I'm like, well, if a game is kind of a graphical showpiece, I don't want to hate on it. That if that was the design of it, like something like a Gran Turismo 3, for example, I would have bought that game back in the day more as a show-off piece than as me being interested in the gameplay. You know? So I don't know. What do you guys think?
I think it's a mix of everything, right? I think it's like a skill tree or whatever, you know, like when you look at the RPG and you see it all pulled out in the different ways, like in Persona. I don't know if one of them justifies it alone. You know what I mean? I guess fun factor sure could. I feel like for us, or me, I should speak for myself, multiplayer is the super rare one, but it's worked before. Like I thought, well, it didn't, I guess. I was going to say Titanfall, but Titanfall was fun as well, right? And it was pretty. Like there's different things there. I mean, it was a multiplayer only game, but it wasn't just that. If it didn't fail, it's not like it. I don't know if I can think of a game that succeeds at one of those and fails at everything else. And you're like,
Sure.
well, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
maybe for me personally, like, no, I mean, I would say DC Universe Online, right? But it had the fun that I liked. It wasn't graphic. It wasn't pretty graphically, but it had multiplayer that I liked too and didn't shove it down my throat for the most part until you got to rating at the end. But I think that's the thing is I think it's a mix, right? This is like a recipe where you're putting different things in.
But okay, that's very accurate. But what if you take each part of it, right, and look at it? Are those parts worth the $60? Because I think that it is the combination of all the things. But I think that the replayability of something like Overwatch makes it worth $60.
Sure.
You know? Or if you look at the fun factor, I agree with there too. Hours of gameplay, yes. Multiplayer, for that game, sure, right? Like all those fit into it. But any single one of those, I'd say make that game worth it.
A fun factor for me, everything we just went through, I think would be paramount in terms of like what I'm going to like, what I think my money's worth, right? Replayability is great. Don't get me wrong, that's on there, it's on the list. But for me, I want to have fun every moment I'm playing it. Length of time, I don't think matters to me. We talk about this with Journey all the time. Not that Journey was fun, but Journey is an amazing game. That is short. Gone Home is an amazing game. That is short. I would have paid more for Gone Home. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the whole thing. I got my press review code for Gone Home and liked it so much I bought it for multiple people online because I wanted everyone to play it and I wanted them to get money. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing where it's like, I think for me, it's fun factor is what I'm going to put above everything else.
Yeah, I agree. I think fun factor is the most important. And then hours of gameplay and replayability, I think, are almost interchangeable in the sense that like they go hand in hand of how much you're playing the game. Like,
sure, but
replaying can be taken multiple ways.
And that's the thing where I think hours of gameplay, all right, it's a 90-hour RPG, right? Is different than it's Overwatch where you're going to play it over and over and over again, or there's a reason, or even if it's a Uncharted that I know I'm going to go back 3 times to platinum or whatever. Like that's replayability versus hours of how long a game is.
Yeah. Ooh. In that case, I might take the hours of gameplay out of my like that's necessary. Like that makes it worth $60.
Sure.
I think that the more like your enjoyment out of how long you play it, the replayability is the more important thing. What about you, Cole?
I don't know. I think there are things that are relevant that aren't on this list. I think the two that come to mind is like the stickiness of the game and the resonance of the game. So like, how long does a game stay with you? And that might correlate with replayability. That might correlate with hours played. But it's more along the lines of like how much do you want to play it, as opposed to how much are you going to or can you play it. I think that's a relevant point. And then the resonance, like how much does it stay with you and stick with you and like. And occupy your mind share. Journey's worth way more than we paid for it, and I really believe that because I think it's such a resonant experience that if you told someone to check boxes on the back of a box should have Journey been retail release, which it was, and it was like 90 minutes long, and you really don't have to play it again, and all that kind of stuff. That would turn people off. But the resonance of that is it eclipses all of those things that we might look at as shortcomings in the game. So, and this is what I've gone into in the past, where I think we have to. There needs to be a more exploratory nature in terms of pricing of games. I do think games can and should probably cost more than $60 sometimes, and I think that games often need to not cost $60. I think games that people are paying $60 for sometimes are not $60 games. So I think it can go both ways. Like, and I've used The Witcher 3 as an example of a game that probably because of its sheer amount of content and because of the thought put into it and because of its pretty graphics and because of its voice acting and its story, that's like that. Why isn't that an $80 or $100 game? And I know that some people like scoff and are drawn back by that, but I'm like, are you not getting your money's worth? Mm-hmm. You know, like so. So I think it has to go both ways, and I would explore that. So I think that the $60, first of all, the $60 game model, I think is kind of that model will only persist as long as retail stores exist. Once that, and we might end up paying $70 just like we used to. I mean, a lot of people don't even know probably because a lot of people are newer to games or they're younger. Like we used to pay $50 for games. Before that, we would often pay between $40 and $80 or $100 for games, depending on cartridge, depending on how big the chips were. So we're in a good spot with $60 games now because $60 games are extremely cheap compared to the games we grew up with, like extremely cheap, the cheapest that they've been ever. In fact, and I did a piece on IGN a long time ago called The Real Cost of Gaming. People can go check that out where I did all the math on how much games actually cost, and that games today are actually cheaper than they've ever been. But I feel like games could get even cheaper, and I think games can get even more expensive. But I think the thing it's the intangibles that matter the most. I don't think you can look into it and be like, are graphics no, graphics are definitely not most important. Are gameplay very important? But I think that goes to the stickiness. Mm-hmm. Hours played and replayability, sure, that's important. I think that goes to the resonance. Yeah. You know? So I think it's these more intangible terms that you have to use, and I think it's going to change because if you say, well, the 20-hour point of this game is a reason why this is worth $60, and then I can just push you another game, then I'm like, well, this game's 20 hours. Why doesn't it matter here? Mm-hmm. You have to use more vague language, I guess is what I'm saying, in terms of like what strikes you than these kind of like PR-ish, bullet points of like, does multiplayer matter? And I'm like, yeah, but multiplayer matters, but that doesn't make the $60 game worth $60. That makes maybe one $60 game worth $60. But I think you have to find out how a game speaks to you on a deeper level, and then you'll find commonality in those.
It's the combination of the parts, right? Yeah. That's the whole thing.
Yeah, you'll find common. I really do believe like our tastes are. If you look at the games you play, there is a commonality between the taste that everyone has. Mm-hmm. I really love first-person shooters, right? But I also really, really love side scrollers. The commonality is mechanics. That's the commonality between those two genres. Those are that's the only thing the Venn diagram really is over, is that in both of those, mechanics are what's most important. Mm-hmm. And so that I know that that's probably what I'm looking for in a game. But if a person will sit through a subpar or a mediocre Japanese role-playing game and then also enjoy a good Japanese role-playing game and they're both 50 hours, then it actually might be length of game that's most important to that person, or bang for their buck, whatever. And that's totally valid.
Yeah.
That's just that. And that was important to me when I was younger. But it's not important to me anymore now that you have once you have disposable income and no more time, you have the inverse problem.
Exactly. Everything gets flipped on its head in terms of what you wanted and what you cared about with a game, right? And that's so weird of I remember being that kid of you'd get you'd get a single player game and you'd sit there and be like, oh man, I hope this never ends. And it goes on, oh my God, it's 2 discs. How great. And now it is that thing of oh fuck. Somebody's like, oh, it's gonna be it's a 50-hour RPG. I'm like, ah, fuck.
Yeah.
and I so if a developer's like, I'll give you a game, like if Square Enix was like, I'll give you a new Final Fantasy Tactics, new full Final Fantasy Tactics, drawn, beautiful pixels and sprites, exactly the way you remember it, totally new story, 50 hours. I'd be like, I'll give you $500 for that. And they were like, but you have to pay $500. I'd be like, fine. So
take my money.
So that's worth a sight unseen. I would do that. So I think you just have, it's a kind of the vagueness of the
question.
Isn't
that kind of the crowdfunding model in a way, where these games are kind of it's more of the pay what you want, and they're going to make that money for the people that would pay that much.
That situation,
they can't actually charge $500 for a game specifically like that.
No. I'm just using an example that the $60 price point is arbitrary.
As games become more and more, and the games industry becomes more and more like the movie industry, it's interesting to see the pricing of movies and how it hasn't changed much. Movies, the pricing goes up, but it's all still standardized. It doesn't matter if it's a 1-hour movie or a 3-hour movie, if it's rated R or rated PG, the content of it, how long it took to make, none of that matters. It is still going to cost you $17 to see that movie. There's not cheaper movies. I mean, I guess there's matinee and stuff like that, but that's more based on
Yeah, or like the secondary theaters that get like the shit that's kicked out, you know.
the theaters and stuff like that. Those are different. That's those are sales compared to like actual.
Yeah, I agree.
Pricing. So we're in video games. We're seeing this where you can buy a Journey for $20 or $15 or whatever it is, and there is the 60s just kind of the standard that people can go to. Like what? I wonder which one of those is more effective. Like when it comes to gaming, like what if all games were just $60? Or should we just totally get rid of the $60 thing completely and kind of really run the gamut of how much games can
No,
cost?
they should. That's what should happen. I think.
You
Personally.
think?
It will make games
blow that
cheaper.
up totally, because that would be the thing of like, I feel like if the order would have had different expectations put on it, if it was $30 at launch, and they were saying we understand it's short, it's a technical thing, and it's the same thing where I think now is like. We're still hung up on the fact, we always talk about it, Colin and I, about this digital future, right? And the fact that we're there and so much of the audience isn't there yet. And if everybody was, it would be that thing of like, oh, sure, I'll take a chance on this game for $5. I'll do 15 here. I'll do that. And then that would, like, I think once everybody gets there and the internet infrastructure gets there and that ball starts rolling and they see how much people are willing to take a shot on a game, you do see people will get clever with what they're doing. They will start breaking up single player and multiplayer campaigns and putting them up, which has already started to happen, but I mean more to an extent. You know what I mean? Like the $60 model will fall away and you will see people try different things.
Yeah, this it worries me because this sounds like the mobile space with stuff where they are doing that, breaking things up in different ways, and that's where the free-to-play microtransactions and all that stuff comes in. Because once the people have to be creative with how they're selling the product because they're not banking on that big number going in, I think that creates a lot of issues potentially for being able to make the order, right? Like that is an expensive game.
Yeah.
So even charging $30, like then that game all of a sudden becomes not even worth making, which some would argue.
Well, I mean, that's
is
the
fine.
thing, right? It's like it does become the risk and reward now of like, okay, cool. Like we believe in our game enough to put it out at $60 because we are saying something about it. And the moment we fuck you over on that decision, as in the gamers as a whole look at it and say, no, that was not worth $60, then they start to question every other game we put out and every other thing we produce and what, Ready at Dawn in this scenario would do next.
Yeah.
How that does get reflected.
I mean, we've seen that even last year with Star Wars Battlefront, where the big calamity was that like this game's not worth $60, and it's up to people to put their money where their mouth is when it comes to the sequels and the future of the franchise or whatever, or EA games in general. But the reason they're saying that game's not worth $60 is because they're not getting everything they expect from games in the past. Like when you start looking at all these things, it's like, oh, it's just multiplayer.
Yep.
The flip side of this is there's no single player. There isn't that the hours of gameplay or whatever and all that. So it's like it just gets hard because we don't exist in an ecosystem where Battlefront could have been, or I think even should have been, $30.
Yeah, I think that like the point that's lost at the top end of like the AAA sphere is that there's no competition, there's no market competition there. Like everyone, they compete with each other for the same price. They're not allowed to. So they're competing for They're competing for mind share and market share based on artistic merit or the quality of the game, which is great and that makes sense. But there could be another front of the war, which is to compete on a market level, which is to say like, and I've said this before, EA or Ubisoft saying like our games are $49.99 now. Well, like then does Activision stay at $59.99? Like there's no room for that. The digital space allows room for that. As long as they have to placate their market overlords and brick and mortar stores, they're not going to do it. But the second that they can do it, someone's going to undercut someone in a major way, and it's going to cause a drop in prices. And that's the thing that I don't understand. Like, there's no example of a market being totally, let's say, kind of uncontrolled from any point of view where. Things are coming of quality, not quality. You can kind of choose like a car market kind of where like, we know that you can maybe expect quality from Honda or something like that. You're going to get kind of a shittier car from Hyundai or something like that. But they do compete with each other because like they're like some people just want the Hyundai and some people want the Honda. But when there's no choice, when like the choice is literally a disparity between $60 and $20, and I know that wasn't very eloquently put, but when there's only a choice between $60 and $20 and maybe a $30 game, I think that's destructive towards the flexibility of game pricing. And so $60 is the mark right now because everyone has to charge that or feels like they have to charge it or might be compelled to charge it because that's what the competitors charge. You don't want to fucking mess up with GameStop and all those kinds of things. But the second that those reins are put off and the market's allowed to flex like any market, competition will make prices go down. That's the way it always happens. Competition doesn't make prices go up. That's not a thing. Like in a real competitive market where there's a bunch of different people throwing all sorts of shit for your attention, prices go down. So if everyone thinks that that the games are too expensive, which I disagree with. I think games are not expensive at all. But if games are too expensive, then you would want that digital future, and you'd want that exploratory kind of thing to go also up to say, like, The Witcher or Cyberpunk, right? Which is the next CD Projekt game, which is supposed to be bigger than The Witcher 3, which is fucking unfathomable to me. That sounds like a game that's worth way more than $60. And in fact, that studio is probably making it in the United States or in one of those places or Western Europe where they'd have to pay their people way more. I don't know if they could even afford to have developed a game that big for that long and not charge more for it. But I'd love someone to come out with the balls to say, hey, our game's worth $80. And this is why. And list off why. And I think you can make a compelling case for that. People would probably buy it because they love The Witcher. So I'd like a situation where we explore these things more on a market basis, because it reminds me, and I know people hate when I get political, but it reminds me of like the Obamacare exchanges, or it reminds me of like student loans, where it's like the reason that these things are expensive or not working is because there's not real competition there. Student loans college is so expensive in the United States because there's no competition for student loans. Like the government just gives them away to everybody, so there's no competition for your money. So things go up. You can just get them for free. If there's competition for that, and colleges didn't know money was free, then everyone would lower their prices because they wouldn't be able to charge you $40,000 a year to go to college anymore. It's the same thing with Obamacare exchanges, where it's like you can only buy California insurance in California, but if you could buy it in New York, if I can go to New York and be like, hey, I want to buy insurance in New York and it's $10 cheaper a month, then they'd be like, oh, well, we'll charge you $15 cheaper here. And then they'd be like, well, the New York guys are gonna be like, well, we want your business still, so $25 cheaper, and back and forth. But as long as there's artificial constraints in those markets on competition, and I feel the same way here, where I feel like the $60 price point is just untenable, not because they're not making enough money, but because I really want people to be comfortable saying, like, our game's $39.99, our game's $49.99, our game's $79.99.
Well, gamers have to get comfortable in buying those and not expecting a lesser experience. That's the other thing we've talked about, right? That budget title, that budget price. And that was, I think you're the greatest example of somebody overcoming that hurdle, right? In the past calendar year has been Ratchet and Clank, where that came out and everybody's like, ooh, they're not charging $60 for it. Maybe it's not going to be what it is. Maybe it's going to be super short. Maybe it's going to be a cash in. And then it came out and it was fucking awesome. And it was a great Ratchet and Clank game. And like those are the success stories you need. Because right now you see a game come out at $49.99, $35.99, and it's in a case, it's on a shelf. And you're like, what's wrong with it? Why? What is that? That's usually relegated to the bargain bin at GameStop. Yeah,
and what's funny about this is this kind of goes back to the point we were making a couple of weeks ago about PSN and Xbox Live and and you were talking about mobile gaming, kind of the unfettered nature of these markets, where there's a flood of shitty games. And then someone had sent me a story with mobile specifically, where like you could cut out 50% of mobile apps and games from a marketplace and not affect the bottom line at all. That's how much shit is on these stores. And so like you definitely have to have some sort of control on quality, because some people were saying, well, it's strange that a more libertarian free market person like me would want to limit a person's ability to appear on a market. And I'm like, no, the person's ability to appear on the market, they are allowed to make their game. They don't have the right to be on a private market. Which is like the PSN or Xbox Live. So there has to be some sort of control of quality. And then if people knew that the games were of a higher general quality, you're not going to like everything that's released, but of a higher general quality with a more exploratory nature in terms of pricing, I think you're going to get a better marketplace with better games. Devs are going to make more money. You're going to be comfortable spending your money more, and you're probably going to be spending less, which is the ironic thing. And you'll probably be buying more games. That's the other ironic thing. But as long as this price point remains, and that's the only stagnant AAA price point, there are people that will refuse to play anything but those games, and that's sad to me. So I think that like there has to be more competition in terms of pricing. And I gave a couple of political examples of why that doesn't work. You can look at market examples of why or why not that doesn't work as well. But I think that that's a really important kind of component to this, is pricing as well. I know the original question was about like what's worth a $60 game. My argument is like, why is a game $60?
Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight into why a couple generations ago Nintendo games were so much cheaper than everyone else's? Like when it was a Nintendo first party game, it was $40, but everyone else's games were $50, even on Nintendo consoles.
My assumption is that they're able to get away with that with retailers, and people might know more. It's the same thing with the Brazil. Remember you guys watch it all the time. I talk about the Brazil, why things are so expensive in Brazil, and I asked you guys to tell me why, and I was right. I might not be right about this one, but let me know in the comments. My assumption is that they're able to eat that because basically, what is it, like 70 to 30 split or whatever between the licensee and the licensor on usually consoles. So Nintendo just keeps all that money. So basically they're just making a little bit less, like that. Like they don't have to take a rip from themselves. So I think they're able to charge less for themselves. I just think that Microsoft and Sony were like, we don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. But it makes their game, they want to sell their games because they're making all of the money, So I think that was just a way for to appeal to a person to say like, well, you buy Call of Duty at $60, the GameStop gets their little rip, and then 30% goes to Sony, and then Activision gets the rest of the money to pay everyone. If you buy the Nintendo first party game, GameStop gets their money, and then Nintendo just gets everything. So I think that it was just there's no split there, and so they're probably making it as much, if not more, on you buying
So that's
a cheaper
why.
Nintendo game. That's my assumption.
Nintendo could do it, but like EA can't do that.
That's my assumption because EA has to pay Sony.
Gotcha. Yeah,
You
that
know?
makes sense.
Yeah, and and obviously the GameStop, I think all the truckers and the manufacturer and stuff. So it's a little more. Not that Nintendo can avoid that, but that is my assumption. Yeah.
I'm interested what you guys think. Let us know in the comments below about what makes a game worth $60 or what games should be worth.